Miguel Zenón, and welcome to In the Tradition, presented by the Atlanta Jazz Festival. My name is Cornelius, and I'm actually the host of WCLK's Upfront Inside the Entertainment Industry. And I'm super excited to be talking to you today about your amazing career as well as your return to the Atlanta Jazz Festival this fall. We're so looking forward to so many artists like yourself coming back to the Atlanta stage, to historic Piedmont Park, and presenting some great jazz music. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Hello to everyone out there. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be in Atlanta very soon.
Yeah, I believe the last time you were in our city was back in 2018, performing as part of the jazz series at the Robert First Center for the Arts. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was the last time. It's amazing how time flies because it seems like that was yesterday.
So when I got the information that I was going to be interviewing you, I was like, I've seen this name before. I've heard this name before. And then when I pulled your face up, I was like, I've seen this guy before.
Mhm.
You actually look like one of my favorite actors, Yul Brynner. Have you ever been
Uh,
told that?
no, I haven't. I haven't. I'm gonna.
Jazz. But I saw your face and I was like, okay, I've seen him before and I'm familiar a little bit with your career. When I went back and started looking at everything, I was completely nominee. You have appeared on, I would say, just about every jazz magazine there is. You have traveled the world. You're considered a cultural ambassador. You're also a MacArthur Fellow as well as a Guggenheim Fellow. Did you ever imagine this for yourself as a kid growing up in San Juan, Puerto Rico?
No, not even close. The thing about music is that I mean, at least in my case, I got into it because I just kind of loved it. Uh, to look into a future where you could actually just play music for fun and maybe make a living off it. So I consider myself lucky and blessed to, be able to do that and be able to be with others. So it's all an added bonus for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about Charlie Bird Parker because, from what I can understand, he was a huge influence, attracted you to his music.
Yeah, I mean, he's still kind of my hero to this day. I think, I came up in Puerto Rico and I went to a classical, so I wasn't really exposed to jazz at school. Discovered jazz through friends and people were passing around tapes and I remember hearing Charlie Parker for the first time and kind of being blown what the fact that he played the instrument so well, and because I've been trained, classical and about the instruments, I was kind of blown away by that. But when I realized that he was improvising, I didn't really know what to make of it. It new to me. So, right there and there, and then I kind of decided like this is what I want to do. Not necessarily be able to play like that, but I just wanted to understand it, get to a point where I could actually understand what he was doing and be able to learn from that.
Yeah. In looking up more information about you, you're not just a saxophonist, but you're also a composer. When did you realize that you had that gift as well? Because I think with most musicians, it's all about, trying to get that first gig. It's all about learning as much as you can about the industry. You're not even thinking about, oh, wow, I'm also a composer as well, or I really enjoy writing music. It's sometimes all about just trying to perform the music. But when did you realize that you also had that gift of writing as well?
Yeah, that came later. I mean, after I sort of made up my mind that I wanted to try to pursue a career as a jazz musician, I ended up moving to the United States to go to school in Boston and then New York. And when I moved to the States, basically all I wanted to do was learn how to play jazz. That was all I wanted, really. So the writing definitely came much later. I think it came at a time when I was trying to I was asking a lot of questions of myself about my own identity as a musician and the kind of, conceptual identity I wanted to portray to the listener. And I understood pretty quickly that, even though there were all the musicians that I admired, like Charlie Parker and Joan Coltrane and Miles Davis and all these heroes that we have, they all had their own path and they had their own identity, and I had to find mine. And I started looking back at my upbringing in Puerto Rico and the music I grew up with and the culture that I grew up with. And that was really the catalyst for me. That's kind of what made me want to go back and study that music and say, okay, so this could be an element that I can infuse into my own personality. So that sort of pushed me to start to write things that assimilated, a lot of the jazz things that I liked, but also a lot of the, more traditional folkloric things that I like, and sort of combine the two. And I sort of kind of found my way that way, as a composer. And once I started doing it, I realized that it was something that I enjoyed as much as playing, So I've been kind of balancing the two since then.
Yeah. I want to stay here on the subject of identity because that's really been a thread I think that has been going through all of your albums, through all of your music over the years. And you've traveled a lot. I mean, you're considered a cultural ambassador for jazz. You've traveled all over the world. How has the different places that you've gone to, how has that changed your identity or your focus or how you see yourself?
No, it definitely has. I think, growing up in Puerto Rico's a small place, it's an island. So, I think the more I got to experience other things that weren't necessarily the things that I had with me as I grew up, you start seeing yourself differently. You start seeing the world differently. And you start appreciating certain things, and kind of like your order priorities changes as well. So it's definitely changed in many ways. One thing for me, and again, kind of going back to this idea of identity, is that being away from my home, in a way, made me appreciate it a lot more, and made me see it from a different light. And that's definitely what happened to me. The more time I spent away, the more I wanted to look back and say, okay, so what can I find there from this distance that can connect me to that idea, and like you said, traveling to other places in the world, meeting different people, and different cultural views on life and different experiences. It's really influenced the way I think about what it means to be a creative artist, what it means to be a human being, and yeah, it's hard not to be affected by those type of experiences.
And so you mentioned looking back. I want to go, or shall I say, talk to you about the fact that you actually go back and you have created this amazing program. I believe it's called the Cultural Caravana. Is that how you
Yeah,
say it?
cultural caravan, caravana
Yeah,
cultural in Spanish. Yeah.
let's talk about that because it really, I liken it to a program that the station WCLK does, or a program that we used to do called Jazz in the Classroom. And that's where
Yep.
we would have artists that were coming through the city. We'd take a day of their time where we would basically take them to a high school or a middle school, and they would talk about their careers to up and coming jazz artists, and the
Yes.
kids would be able to play with them, and then they'd also
Mhm.
get into the performance later on that night, which is kind of similar to what you do with this program. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a program that it was kind of like a dream that I always had, and it eventually became a reality because of, and partly because of the help of this grant that you mentioned, this MacArthur Fellowship. Uh, but the idea really came from the thought that cultural exposure, cultural experiences in general, is something that I feel is essential to society, right? I mean, I don't think, I think in most societies it doesn't get the importance that it should, but I feel that a society where culture is given a certain uh, element of priority is always a better society, and I always had this in mind, and I've always thought that cultural experiences is something that should be available to everyone equally, right? Um, so I've been thinking about this idea for a long time, and I always thought, if I ever had the opportunity, I would love to use what I do, which is music and jazz specifically, to sort of preach this idea, right? To maybe travel around my country and go to different places and play concerts and just say, listen, this is an event that we're just bringing to you. Just you can enjoy music, and no preconceptions, no biases, just music directly to the audience, and that was really the idea. And then we kind of tailored it around this idea of connecting to the communities themselves. So what we do is we go into these communities, which are rural communities. We kind of leave the cities and go into the rural areas of the island, and we connect with a local, a music teacher, so they can put together a group of students that are then prepared to play with us the day of the concert. Most of the time, the students they've never played jazz before, and they never improvised. So the idea of like preparing for the concert is already it's already a lot of work for them. But also, our idea is to think about this as, okay, so we're coming in to your town, we're bringing this music to you, but we also want to involve the community in what we do. So when the people come to the concerts and they see the kids playing next to us, they go, okay, so that's my nephew, or that's my neighbor, or that's the kid down the street. So it's like there's a connection. And we combine this with an educational element, not only for the young musicians, but also for the audience in general. We have a pre-concert sort of presentation where we talk about the history of jazz music, and when we talk about jazz improvisation, for example. Each concert is focused on a specific figure from jazz history. So Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, etc. So we talk about their music, and then on the concert we play exclusively their music, to sort of kind of present the idea of jazz as a medium and as something that represents musical history. And I think since 2011, we've probably presented about 12 or 13 concerts. We had to stop a couple years ago because of a few reasons. We had this huge natural disaster in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria, that sort of devastated the island. So the island kind of took a long way to come back in terms of infrastructure. And then last year, when we were about to have another concert, then we ran into the situation where we're all experiencing now. But we're hoping, hopefully maybe sometime soon, maybe within the next year, we'll be able to get back on it. And to be honest, I mean, I've gotten the chance to play in a lot of places and experience music in many ways, but this has definitely been the most rewarding experience that I've gotten from music in general, because I feel that this is a very pure way to connect with an audience just by saying, we're bringing the music to you. I've had people come up to me after the concert saying, I've never heard jazz before. I didn't even know what it was before coming here, but it was so enjoyable, and now I'm going to look into it. Or this was so nice. I came with my whole family. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it just makes you feel like you're actually making a connection beyond the notes, beyond the publicity and branding and all this thing. It's just like music as a means of communication, as a means of bringing people together, as a means of cementing this idea of the importance of culture. So it's been really incredible, and I'm really looking forward to keeping this going for a while.
I consider your music as a bridge between the races and the cultures. Was that always the intent for you?
Well, it's hard to say what it was at first. I mean, I think at first I was really just trying to emulate things that I liked. There were some musicians, also Latin American musicians, who, when I was coming up, someone like Danilo Perez, a great pianist from Panama, or David Sanchez, the great saxophonist from Puerto Rico, who's actually an Atlanta resident, by the way. Who I definitely looked up to their music, and other heroes like Charlie Parker and like folks that we mentioned already, Miles and Coltrane. So a lot of it initially was trying to emulate things that I like, but I think eventually, there was definitely this idea of creating a sort of balance or bridge, if you will, like you mentioned, between music, like things that have to do with jazz music and creative music that sort of came from a specific part of the world, and then music that's also folkloric, or I think folkloric in nature, that came from another part of the world, and trying to bridge the two. Really my goal is to really make it feel like it's two entities sort of walking together and creating simultaneously instead of like running into each other and trying to figure out what's going on. I'm trying to get them to walk together and sort of eventually merge and become one thing.
Well, I think you've done an amazing job of doing that. I want to talk about how you have remained extremely busy during this pandemic. I think when a lot of artists, as my friend referred to, the world, came to an end last year, a lot of artists and a lot of creatives were trying to figure out, how do I maneuver in this new world? But it appears that you were able to just keep going. I mean, you've released new music, you had virtual concerts, you even started interviewing artists through your In Conversation platform. So let's talk about how you were just able to pivot immediately during this pandemic.
Yeah, well, it wasn't immediate. I would say. I mean, I think there was a shock element to all of us when this happened. I mean, a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I was on tour. I was on the road, and life was just what it was. And then it was very sudden, where like you said, everything just ended. It's like the lights just went off, and no more concerts. Everything closed down. People closed up in their homes, and it was a hard time, specifically because most musicians and creative artists were like, okay, so what do I do now? What can I how can I and I've talked to a lot of musicians who they just didn't find the inspiration, and they were like, I can't really, I can't feel it. But I think from my sense, I mean, as terrible as the situation was, I kind of saw it as an opportunity to, okay, so let me get to a bunch of things that I've never had time to do. A bunch of different things, ideas that I've always wanted to do that I just never had time because I was just always on the move or working with something else. So, I started producing a little bit at home. I started, like putting together these interviews, like you mentioned, connecting with musicians at a distance and trying to get their views and trying to keep something going, a conversation. I started writing music and started practicing more and connecting with the idea of teaching and all of that. I felt that, in a way, I mean, I'm kind of a half full type of guy, and I've always felt that this is gonna end at some point, right? At some point, we're gonna go to some kind of normalcy, and when that happens, like I don't want to be rusty. You know what I mean? I want to be like as where I was before, or even better. So I felt I'm just gonna take advantage of this time to just work on things and learn new tools and just like try to stay on top of things creatively, so that when we go out there, I'm feeling inspired, and I'm feeling like I have something that I worked during this time that I can offer.
Let's talk about your current project, which was actually performed back in 2019, I believe, in Stockholm. Is that correct? And it's a tribute to Ornate Coleman.
Yeah, yeah, it was recorded in Basel, in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that was released very recently, and one of the things that I've done, like you mentioned, is I've released a couple of projects during this time. They were both recorded live. One is this project you mentioned, which features the music of Ornette Coleman, and before that, I released this album, which was released during the pandemic here in New York, that features bolero, traditional boleros from Latin America. That was a duo recording. Um, I would say with both of them, if we weren't living in the current circumstances, they probably wouldn't have been released. I think partly the reason to release those projects was because I felt that because we're not performing, it's a way of staying connected with the listener, right? So you have music out there, and you have music that people can listen to. They can't come hear you live, but they have things. Okay, so you're putting things out there, and people can hear that. And also, there's a very specific energy to live music that I definitely, and I'll be honest here, I definitely took for granted. I took for granted the difference that it makes having an audience there. You know, and during this time, I mean, I've done remote concerts and a lot of those things, but it's certainly not the same. Even if you're playing with another musician and you're both playing in the same room and you're playing live, uh, there's a sort of like there's an element. sort of like this invisible force that's there that the audience creates. And I was talking to someone the other day about this, and I was saying, even if you're playing in a room and everyone's sitting there in silence, not even clapping, just like breathing, that still affects the music because you have someone in front of you and you're playing for that person. You're not playing for a lens, or you're not playing for a camera or a computer. You're playing for the person that's there, and that's going to influence the way you play. So this latest project, the Ornette project, which was, like you mentioned, it was recorded in 2019. That was recorded with people in the room. So when I listen to it now, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm listening to something that was recorded 30 years ago because it seems so far away. Uh, but at the same time, it gives me hope. I'm like, okay, so one day we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that energy once again. And we're gonna get to that energy with, like, you play notes, someone screams in the audience, like that kind of thing, where like you getting that immediate response. So it's been fun. It's been fun putting these projects out, and like I said, I'm just looking forward to having that opportunity to connect with an audience in a room once again.
Well, you will be doing that this fall as part of the Atlanta Jazz Festival again. It is returning to historic People's Park, and we're super excited to have all of these world-class artists gracing the Atlanta Jazz Festival stage. How are you going to approach this performance coming out of what has appeared to be, as my friends and I, we jokingly call the COVID decade. It seems like it's been 10 years, not 1 year. But how are you going to approach this live performance post-COVID?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because obviously we haven't been performing, this type of things like with real, like, what used to be a normal situation. It's been a while. So first of all, I would say I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, besides it being an amazing place and playing at the park, and I remember being there a couple of years ago, and it was amazing, amazing festival, and just so much joy, and the energy is so great. I'm looking forward to that. But like the idea of playing in front of people, I feel that, and also playing playing with the band, because I have a working group and we play a bunch, but we haven't played in a minute. So I have this feeling that when we get back to playing, it's gonna be a hurricane, like we're just gonna be like, "Ah," like really wanting to get that energy. So I'm certainly looking forward to it. It's hard to say what it's gonna be like, it's hard to say. But we're definitely. I mean, I think whenever we go back to playing in general, it's gonna be. I think the energy is gonna be sort of a mixture of like release, but also gratitude. I feel there's a lot of that. We're like, okay, well, man, I'm just thankful to be able to do this, and thankful to be able to share. And in Atlanta, I'm sure that's going to be the case. We're going to be in that amazing environment, and we're just going to be very, very eager and very grateful to get the opportunity to share with the listening public there.
I want to go back to the conversations that you've had with a lot of artists. I saw the conversation that you did have with David Sanchez. What have you learned from those conversations as an artist standpoint? What has been something that you've picked up as an artist from these conversations?
Yeah. So the idea for that, like you mentioned, I spoke to David and a bunch of other artists. The idea initially was to, okay, so let me just try to connect with friends and kind of like open the door to the conversations that usually happen in private between musicians, basically talking about music. There's a lot of things that we talk about in sound check or backstage, or on the plane, on the bus, or whatever, when we just kind of get deeply into things that have to do with music, or what are you listening to, or what inspires you, what have you been practicing, those kinds of things that usually people don't see, or hear. So that was the idea, connecting with friends and connecting with musicians who I feel are inspiring. And it started, as something that okay, so maybe I'll just do this and see what happens. And then it just became a thing where, like, okay, so this is something that's actually, I was getting so much inspiration just from hearing them talk. Because even though I was connecting with folks who I knew, and some of them I knew really well for many, many years, I always felt like I got to know them better, just by having this in-depth conversations about their life and their career and what they're doing during this time, for example, which I thought it was inspiring to me, and I just felt happy to get the opportunity to share it, you know. So it's been great. And you know, another thing that I've gotten from it, I've gotten to talk to a lot of elders in our field who've been playing music for a long time, and I've gotten to hear about their experience, their career, all the people they play with, and what they think about music, what they think about the current state of music now. It's been amazing, you know. And one of the things that I enjoy about this is being the eternal student. You know, I feel like it's the kind of thing where, like, if I always feel like I have something to learn and someone to learn from, I just find that really inspiring. And yeah, I want to keep it going as long as I can.
What are your thoughts on the future of jazz as the world continues to become smaller and smaller, and we see this coming together of different cultures, and you definitely have been a part of that. You've been a bridge, if you will, between the cultures and the races. How do you see the future of jazz?
You know, I honestly think that in terms of creative spirit and creative ideas, jazz is as good as it's ever been, to be honest. You know, I mean, there's so many musicians and so many different points of views and ideas and ways of thinking about what this music is, that is kind of an unstoppable force in a way, you know. But I also feel like you mentioned that, you know, jazz has always been very inclusive music, you know, from the beginning. If you look at Jelly Roll Morton and Louis Armstrong, I mean, they were infusing and bringing ideas from other parts of the world into this music from the very, very beginning. And then you look at what happened in the 50s with, you know, Afro-Cuban music and bebop, and how that kind of infused, and the music of John Coltrane and Miles, how they brought music from Africa and Asia and all these places. So I feel that jazz has always been very, very inclusive. And one thing that I feel is that it's become this very, very global type of music. You know, this music obviously was born in the United States, but it's become this global phenomenon in the sense that not only is it bringing musicians and music from other places, but it's also influencing music from other parts of the world. You know, so you hear jazz sounds in West African music, and Caribbean music, and Brazilian music, and it's kind of like you mentioned, is a bridge. You know, something that goes in and out. So I feel very inspired by the idea that there are a lot of, you know, a lot of lines and a lot of borders, a lot of frontiers that are being blurred. And you know, what people used to say, okay, so this is Latin jazz, or this is African jazz, or jazz fusion, or whatever, that's kind of disappearing, and jazz is becoming something that you can define, has a broader definition, right? It's something that you can say, oh, jazz can be so many things, because you see examples of all these things happening all over the world.
This series is titled In the Tradition, and wanted to know, has there been something that has followed you from the beginning of your career up until now? Has there been a practice or a belief or something that has stayed with you from the beginning of your career until now?
Yeah, well, yeah, there are a few things. I mean, one thing I could say, and I'm glad you mentioned tradition, and I mentioned earlier this idea of being the eternal student. I feel that, and especially with jazz music, you know, I mean, you can always think, you know, let me move forward and let me push for the next thing and find my own personality. But I'm really a believer that a lot, well, not a lot, everything that we do as creative personalities is built on the footsteps of our ancestors and masters that came before us, and the pillars that they kind of laid down so we could kind of walk on steady ground. So I've always been very mindful of looking back, right? And saying, okay, so let me see, if I want to study this music, let me look back and see how it developed. What is the history? How did it get from point A to point B to point C to where we are now? And how does that pertain to me particularly? You know? So that's one thing that's definitely been there from the beginning. And then the other thing, and something that's helped me personally, just from a personal standpoint, is to try to be, you know, just to try to be organized and try to be focused in terms of what I'm trying to achieve. You know, for musicians, is there's a lot going on all the time, and you know, it's easy to lose focus on what you're trying to shoot for and your goals and all that. But for me specifically, it's been very helpful to be as organized, as clear about, what the next step is going to be as possible, so that I'm prepared, and I'm prepared if something doesn't work here, that I can go here. And I feel, if there was one thing that's helped me during my career, is, being prepared and being organized and being focused. It's sort of like it's opened a lot of doors and made the road a little easier.
Absolutely. Miguel Zenón, thank you so much for being a part of this amazing series in the tradition presented by the Atlanta Jazz Festival. How can our viewers stay in contact with you on social media?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a Facebook, a Twitter under Miguel Zenón, Instagram is Miguel Zenón Music, website miguelzenon.com. I'm always looking forward to hearing from folks. I'm very, very excited to be part of this series. Very, very excited to be coming back to Atlanta. It's such an amazing city, and that date's been on my calendar, kind of like with a big happy face for a very long time. So I'm looking forward to that for sure.
All right. Thank you once again and continue to stay safe. And we'll see you this fall.
Hopefully. Thank you very much.